Hi guys, I hope everybody is doing good. And you are enjoying my videos. Let's get into something new today, which we are going to learn. Okay, so I'm going to basically touch upon the topic of simple interest and compound interest today in detail. But before I go there, right, I just wanted to give you just a high level overview of why do we need to learn this particular topic. Okay, the reason being all these you might have seen all these topics in your school curriculum, right? Percentages, simple interest, compound interest, profit and loss, mark price and discounts and everything. So all these topics basically come under the subject of commercial mathematics. What do you mean by commercial mathematics? Commercial mathematics has to do with businesses deal with a lot of money on a daily basis, right? They do a lot of transactions and everything. So that's why we call it commercial mathematics. Percentages we do use for other purposes as well, like calculating your marks in the school and everything. But percentage is a necessity to be used in all these three topics. That's why I've listed it over here. So for the time being, just have a very high level view that these topics come under a subject called commercial mathematics. With that introduction, right, let me get into the details of simple interest and compound interest, right? So you might all be aware of what is a bank, right? You all know what is a bank. Bank is a place where we go to basically deposit our money. We go to deposit our money. We as a consumer, right, have some amount of money at home, say 1,000 rupees. If I want to basically keep that money at home, what happens is that if you keep 1,000 rupees at home, right, it remains 1,000 rupees for the longer period of time you keep it at home. Okay, so what happens is that instead of keeping at home, most of us what we do is that we deposit that money in a bank or a financial institution. A financial institution is like a bank only, but what happens is they don't have banking capabilities like how a bank can operate. So just take it as a bank for the time being for your knowledge. So what happens is that when you basically deposit that money in the bank, right, bank in turn pays you interest. There is some amount which the bank will pay you in return over a period of time. Suppose you deposit the money for 1 year at some rate of interest which the bank is offering. So on that 1,000 rupees, right? Suppose you deposit 1,000 rupees in the bank for 1 year. The bank may return you 1,100 rupees. The 100 rupees will be your interest, and the total amount which they will give you after 1 year is 1,100 rupees. So what happens is that putting that money into bank gets you some additional amount, right? Similarly, what do the banks do with that kind of money? Whatever money you're putting in the bank, what does the bank do with that money? Does the bank keep it with itself? Again, with the same logic, right? If it keeps it with itself, right, it is not going to make money. So what they will do is that they give loans. They give loans to people like us. In the case of, suppose I want to buy a bike, I want to buy a car, I want to buy a home. So what do banks do is that bank basically gives loans to consumers. When I need some money, I go to the bank and say that I want to buy a bike, can you give me some loan? So in turn, what happens is that the consumer pays interest on the amount which they take it from the bank. Make sense? So when a consumer deposits money into the bank pays interest to the consumer. And when a bank pays loan to the consumer, right, the consumer pays interest to the bank, right? So I hope you get this. You get this particular logic. So that is where this term interest is coming over here. If you look at it, in the process of transporting money between the consumer and bank and consumer, there is something called interest. What the bank does is that whatever money you deposit with them, they will basically give it to somebody and earn interest on that. And that's the way the money is rolling in the market on a daily basis, and both make money. The consumer makes money and the bank also makes money on that one. So what happens if you look at it? What are you putting with the bank? A sum of money, for example 1,000 rupees you put in the bank. Suppose the bank says that I'm going to give you 10% interest on that particular amount. This is your principal amount and this is your tenure. Tenure is nothing but duration. You go to the bank and say that I want to put this money for 1 year. So what happens at the end of 1 year, right? You're going to get some interest on this particular numbers, whatever you see over here. So this is what is to do with what happens behind the scenes when you put the money in the bank or you take money from the bank. And that is where these two terms come into picture: simple interest and compound interest. So let's look into details that what is the difference between simple interest and compound interest. Okay, I'll explain you with a very simple example so that you do understand very well what is the difference, because I have seen most of the kids, they fail to basically understand the difference, and what happens as a result is that when there are problems given to them, right, they basically get stuck with those problems. So so first up, I'll put two columns over here. This is your simple interest and this is your compound interest. Let's see the difference between these two. Now you may have seen that in simple interest there is something called principal. Principal is the amount which you are depositing into the bank, or you're basically lending from the bank. That's the amount. For example, say you're depositing 1,000 rupees in the bank, right? And the bank says that I'm going to pay a rate of interest on this one. I'm going to pay you 10% interest per annum. Per annum is always means it is per year. And suppose you deposit that money for 1 year. So you might have seen, right? There is a formula. How do you calculate the simple interest on that particular amount? The formula is principal into time into rate divided by 100. That's the formula you use to calculate your simple interest. So let's look at it. We put 1,000 rupees, the principal over here. Then the time was 1 year. Your rate was 10%, and that is why you're dividing it by 100 over here, because it's 10%. When you remove the percentage, you have to divide. Percentage always means it's out of 100. Anything out of 100. So if you look at it, I cancel these two zeros. So what is the interest coming out to be? It's 100 rupees. So at the end of 1 year, right, the amount which is paid back to the consumer will be equal to the principal what he has put into the bank, right, plus the simple interest what he is getting. This is the money which he has earned on as an interest on that particular amount. So as a result, what happens? The consumer gets 110 rupees as the amount at the end of the year. Fair enough. This is what is simple interest. Now let's go to compound interest. Let's take the same example. Your principal for the first year is 1,000 rupees, right, which you are depositing into the bank. The rate is again 10%. And say time is also 1 year, right? So what is the interest you're going to get? Again, I'm going to use the same formula. Interest, instead of writing SI over here, I'll just write it as interest. I'll put it as interest. Interest, again, you calculate with the same formula. So what do you get over here? 1,000 into 1 year into 10% divided by 100. So again, at the end of the first year, you're going to get an interest of 100 rupees. Now look at it. This is where the difference comes over here between simple interest and second compound interest. Now suppose in this particular case, what is the amount the consumer is going to get after a year? He is going to get 1,000 plus 100. So his amount is 1,100, right? The amount of money which he gets back is 1,100. Now suppose the consumer says that I'm not going to take this amount, but I'm going to put this amount back into your bank again. So what happens in the case of a compound interest is that the principal for the next year will become 1,100. Okay, the principal for the next year, the second year, I'm going to put back that money again into the bank. Again, the bank says that okay, I'm going to give you 10% interest. And again, the time for next 1 year will be 1 year. Again, so you calculate the interest on this particular amount. It is again PTR by 100, right? So it is 1,100 into 1 into 10 divided by 100. So if you look at it, how much do you get it? your interest comes out to be 110 rupees in this particular case, right? And what is the amount you're going to get after the second year? You have deposited 1100 rupees in the second year as principal plus your 110 rupees over here. So overall, you're going to get 1210. That's the amount which you're going to get as your amount at the end of second year. But in this particular case, in the simple interest, let's come back now. Let's come back to simple interest to understand the subtle difference between these two. You have basically got this amount at the end of first year, right? So now you decide that no, I don't want to take that money. I want to put that money back again. I want to put that money back again into the bank. So what I'm going to do is that in the case of simple interest, the principal remains the same. Whatever you started with, 1000 rupees. In the first year, the consumer has got an interest of 100 rupees. But what is he doing over here is that he is not putting that 100 rupees back as principal. So for the second year, the principal remains as 1000 rupees. Your time is for the second year, it is again 1 year, you're putting that money and your rate is again 10%. So when you calculate the interest for the second year, it is again 1000 into 1 into 10 by 100, which is equal to another 100 rupees. So if you look at it, right, what is the interest earned, total interest earned? In 2 years, it will be interest 1 plus interest 2. If you look at it, his interest is going to be, his or her interest is going to be rupees 200. So at the end of the second year, the consumer gets an amount of 1000, what he has invested initially, plus 200 rupees, which is 1221. Sorry, it is 1200 rupees over here. It is 1200 rupees over here. So if you look at it, right, there is a clear difference between these two. If you look at it, what is the difference between the amounts which you are getting back? Here you're getting 10 rupees extra compared to what you're getting over here. So the main difference what you see is that between simple interest and compound interest is that the amount for the second year changes over here. When you take the amount for the second year, it is not 1000 rupees what you started with. Whatever interest you have got in the first year, right, that gets added to your principal amount, and that principal is used to do the calculation. So in the longer run, what happens? If you put the money for a longer duration, suppose say 10 years, right? If you put the money, your compound interest will be significantly higher than simple interest. Got the concept? Make sense? Okay, great. Thank you.